My name is Lauren Bennett, and tonight I'm sitting at a round table draped in white linen, staring at the twinkling lights strung across the vineyard patio. The September air is cool enough to raise goosebumps along my bare arms, but it's not the chill that makes me shiver. It's the sound of my sister's voice, steady, lilting, practiced, floating through the microphone as she tells a story that isn't hers. And after years of hard work, I finally paid off Mom's medical bills and helped cover Dad's rent while I built my career. My champagne flute tightens in my grip until the stem squeaks. Every head at the table turns toward her, admiration softening their smiles. The clink of cutlery, the faint rustle of a nearby oak tree, the flicker of candles, each sound feels painfully sharp. No one notices me. That part, the late-night calls from hospital billing, the envelopes I stuffed with checks, the double shifts I pulled, belongs to me. Yet here she stands in her ivory silk gown, stealing my story as if it were a bouquet tossed casually into the crowd. A vibration rattles against my clutch. My phone screen glows with a text from someone I haven't heard from in years, someone who once told me I'd have to fight for every ounce of respect I'd ever get. I inhale, the scent of crushed grapes and garden roses mingling in my throat, and something inside me finally settles into place. 3 years earlier, I was 24 and standing in the cramped kitchen of our family's bungalow in Portland, Oregon. The overhead light flickered, like it couldn't decide whether to stay alive or give up, just like me in that moment. "Lauren, you're being dramatic," my mother said, scraping the last of the spaghetti into a plastic container. "Your sister's career is taking off. Maybe you should follow her lead and settle for something stable instead of chasing these, what do you call them, consulting gigs." I swallowed hard, feeling the lump in my throat scrape like sandpaper. My palms were slick with dishwater and nerves. "I'm not chasing anything. I'm building something." Across the table, Jenna, my older sister by exactly 11 months, leaned back in her chair with a smirk that never reached her eyes. "Building? Lauren, you're freelancing. That's just a fancy word for unemployed." The words landed like a slap. My knuckles whitened around the dish towel. "Unemployed people don't pay half the mortgage." I shot back before I could stop myself. Silence. Mom closed the container with a sharp snap. Dad, always the peacekeeper, cleared his throat but said nothing. Jenna tilted her head, blonde hair gleaming under the faulty light. "You really think a few invoices make you some kind of hero? Grow up." Something inside me cracked then, like a dam finally giving way. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs, every beat a dare. I turned to the small corkboard by the fridge. Pinned there, beneath grocery coupons and an overdue water bill, hung a single postcard. My grandmother, Evelyn, had mailed it to me the week before she passed, a watercolor of wild blue lupins and a single line in her shaky handwriting. "The world will try to shrink you. Don't let it." My eyes fixed on those words as a steadiness washed through me, cool and fierce. "I'm not the one who needs to grow up," I said quietly, more to myself than to Jenna. I dried my hands, grabbed my jacket, and pulled the postcard free from the corkboard, tucking it into my pocket. That night, I walked out into the damp Portland air, the smell of rain and cedar sharp against my skin. I didn't know exactly where I was heading, only that I wouldn't be coming back the same. The first winter away from home was a blur of gray skies and sleepless ambition. I rented a one-bedroom walk-up in Seattle where the radiators hissed like impatient cats and the windows rattled with every gust of Puget Sound wind. The place smelled faintly of old coffee grounds and wet paint, but it was mine, and every square foot whispered possibility. By day, I worked a 9-to-5 assistant job at a small marketing firm. By night, I built what I called Bennett Strategies, a tiny consultancy I hoped would someday pay my bills without needing a boss. My desk was a thrift store table wedged beside the window, my office chair an old diner stool wrapped in duct tape. I lived on black coffee and instant ramen. There were nights when the city outside blurred into streaks of rain and neon, and I'd wonder if my sister was right, that freelancing was just a more glamorous word for floundering. But every time the doubt pressed in, I reached into the pocket of my coat for Grandma Evelyn's postcard. The paper had grown soft at the edges, The blue lupins almost faded, but her words, "The world will try to shrink you. Don't let it," always steadied my breath. About 6 months in, I met Marisol Vega, the firm's senior strategist and one of the few women in leadership. She noticed the late nights I spent at my desk, and one evening, when most of the office had emptied, she leaned against the doorway of my cubicle. "You have a good eye for patterns," she said, scanning the analytics I'd been obsessing over. "Ever think about running your own shop?" I almost laughed. That's the dream. Right now, it's just me and a cracked laptop. Her dark eyes softened. "Every empire starts with someone burning the midnight oil. Keep going. And when you're ready, I'll send you my first client." True to her word, 3 months later Marisol forwarded a corporate lead, a mid-sized organic food brand desperate for a rebranding campaign. I spent every spare hour on that proposal, rewriting copy, sketching design concepts, researching trends until sunrise. When they signed the contract, the payment cleared just in time to cover my rent and, quietly, my mother's mounting medical bills. I never mentioned it at home. I mailed checks anonymously to the hospital's billing office, letting them believe some mysterious benefactor had appeared. When Dad called one evening, marveling that the balances were disappearing, I just said, "That's wonderful," and bit my tongue until my chest ached. Within a year, Bennett Strategies had 4 steady clients and a waiting list. I hired a part-time assistant, bought my first leather office chair, no duct tape required, and signed the lease on a loft downtown with brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows. On social media, though, I posted only snapshots of coffee cups and city sunsets. No bragging rights. No mention of revenue. If Jenna or anyone else checked, they'd see nothing more than a quiet life in Seattle. But I knew the truth. The empire was rising, and no one, not even my sister, could see how high I'd already climbed. The vineyard glowed in soft gold as twilight settled, the fairy lights strung from the oak trees flickering like captured stars. I stood near the edge of the dance floor, my satin heels sinking slightly into the damp earth. Laughter and the sweet, yeasty scent of champagne drifted across the patio while the band eased into a slow jazz number. Jenna twirled in her ivory gown, the crystal beads catching every glint of light. Guests hovered around her like moths to a candle, her college friends, distant relatives, old neighbors, each one eager to bask in her orbit. I watched her raise a glass for yet another toast, her voice ringing clear and confident. "And I'm so grateful," she said, pausing for effect, "that even during the hardest years, when Mom was sick, when Dad was struggling with the rent, I managed to hold our family together. I covered bills, juggled work, kept us afloat." She pressed a hand to her heart, a practiced gesture. It wasn't easy, but it made this moment, this wedding, possible. A ripple of admiration moved through the crowd. My chest tightened. The stem of my wineglass pressed a groove into my fingers. For years, I'd told myself it didn't matter who got the credit. But tonight, something shifted. Maybe it was the postcard, folded carefully in my clutch, the inked words of Grandma Evelyn humming like a private anthem. Maybe it was the text I'd received an hour earlier from Marisol. "Proud of you. Don't stay silent tonight." I stepped forward, heart thudding in time with the bass line. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying just enough to turn heads. Jenna's smile froze. "Lauren." I moved to the center of the patio. The air smelled of crushed grapes and rose petals, but my pulse drowned it all out. I'd like to say something. The crowd parted slightly, curiosity flickering in their eyes. "I love my sister," I began, keeping my voice even. "But there's something you don't know about the story you just heard." A hush fell over the vineyard, broken only by the cicadas in the vines. 3 years ago, when Mom's medical bills piled higher than the mortgage, when Dad's rent notices arrived in red ink, it wasn't Jenna covering those costs. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the faded postcard, the blue lupins barely visible. I did. I worked 2 jobs. I built my own consulting firm from scratch. And I sent every check without signing my name because I didn't need applause. I just needed my family safe. A low murmur rippled through the guests. Jenna's cheeks flushed the color of the Pinot in my glass. I held up the postcard. My grandmother wrote these words: "The world will try to shrink you. Don't let it. Tonight, I'm done shrinking." Silence stretched, heavy and electric. Someone near the back whispered, "She did all that?" Dad's eyes widened, then softened with something like shame. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Jenna's lips parted, but no words came. I let the quiet linger, feeling its weight shift, the balance of the evening tilting toward truth. Then I lowered the postcard and spoke, calm and clear. "I'm proud of what I built, and I won't let my work, my sacrifices, be erased." The band had stopped playing, but the vineyard seemed to hum with an energy all its own. I set the postcard gently on the nearest table and met my sister's gaze. For the first time in years, she looked small, not from the fairy lights or the fading dusk, but from the sudden absence of borrowed glory. The silence stretched so long that even the cicadas seemed to pause. Then, one by one, people began to move slowly, almost awkwardly, like the entire vineyard needed to exhale. Dad reached for Mom's hand, his face a blend of pride and regret. A distant cousin whispered something I couldn't catch. My heart hammered, but my voice stayed steady. "Jenna," I said, turning toward my sister, "I never wanted a public scene. But you chose to tell my story as your own, and I can't let that stand." Her eyes glistened, whether from guilt or shock, I couldn't tell. "Lauren, I didn't think it mattered. It matters to me." I slipped the postcard back into my clutch and squared my shoulders. "And from now on, things will be different. For all of us." I took a breath, the cool night air filling my lungs. "Here's what I need if you want me in your life." The crowd fell still again. I could feel the weight of every gaze. "First," I said, "acknowledge what really happened. Not tonight if you can't, but soon. To Mom and Dad. To anyone you told that story. Give credit where it belongs." Jenna's throat worked as she swallowed. "Second," I continued, "stop treating ambition like a contest. You and I can both succeed without stealing from each other. But that means no more quiet digs, no more borrowed victories. If we can't respect each other's paths, then we'll keep our distance." I saw Marisol near the edge of the patio, her dark eyes encouraging me on. "And finally," I said, softer now, "don't apologize to me tonight just to smooth things over. Take the time to understand why this hurt. Then decide if you're ready to rebuild trust. If you are, I'll be here. But I won't shrink again. Not for anyone." A breeze carried the scent of crushed grapes and cooling candle wax across the patio. I let the quiet settle, not rushing to fill it. Dad stepped forward first, his voice rough. "Lauren, we should have seen it. We should have thanked you." Mom nodded, tears glistening. "You saved us, honey." "I'm so sorry." Jenna's mascara had begun to smudge. She took a shaky breath. I need time. But you're right. I went too far." Her gaze met mine, tentative, almost pleading. "Can we talk tomorrow?" My shoulders loosened, the tension of years easing like a knot finally untied. "Tomorrow works," I said quietly. The band picked up a slow, hopeful tune, the first notes of a waltz curling through the night air. Around us, conversations resumed, tentative but warm. I slipped the postcard from my clutch and set it gently on the table, the lupins glowing faintly in the candlelight. Grandma Evelyn's words had carried me through every long night, and tonight, they'd carried me home. The vineyard slowly eased back into its rhythm, laughter resurfacing like bubbles in a long-poured glass of champagne. The band's waltz wound through the night air, soft enough to let the cicadas reclaim their song. I stood beneath the oak tree where the fairy lights swayed gently, the cool breeze brushing my shoulders like a quiet benediction. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not because everyone suddenly understood me, but because I had finally spoken the truth. Dad and Mom approached, their faces etched with both pride and apology. Mom squeezed my hands as though to anchor me. "Lauren," she whispered, "I should have asked more questions. I should have seen you." "You see me now," I said, and for once it wasn't an accusation but a simple fact. They drew me into a long embrace. I breathed in the familiar scent of my father's aftershave, cedar and something faintly sweet, and realized the bitterness I'd carried for so long had begun to dissolve. Across the patio, Jenna hovered at the edge of the crowd, her gown catching the last of the twilight. When our eyes met, she lifted a hesitant hand. I returned a small nod. No more words tonight. Understanding would take time, and that was enough. I wandered back to the table and retrieved the postcard. The edges were worn now, the ink faded, but Grandma Evelyn's handwriting remained clear. The world will try to shrink you. Don't let it. I traced the looping letters with my thumb, feeling the quiet strength behind every stroke. My life was no longer about proving Jenna wrong or carrying my family's weight in secret. It was about choosing when and how to stand tall, about knowing that my worth wasn't measured by applause or by someone else's borrowed story. A burst of music signaled the next dance set. I slipped the postcard into my clutch and walked toward the lights, each step grounded in a confidence I'd earned alone. Tonight, I had taken back my voice. And in that quiet, unshakable truth, I finally understood. No one can shrink a woman who knows her own size.